Start recording. All right. So what is your name and position here?
My name is Carrie Martin, Dr. Carrie Martin, and I am a full professor in the Digital Media and Journalism Department of the School of Communication and the Arts here at Liberty University.
All right, and so before the events of 9/11, what do you remember hearing about the World Trade Center?
Well, before the 9/11, the World Trade Center was just part of the New York skyline, and just like the Empire State Building. I had been to New York before to visit, but I did not go up in the World Trade Center. Instead, I went up at the Empire State Building because, frankly, you get a little better view. Empire State Building's kind of in the middle of Manhattan, and the World Trade was down at the southern end of it. But I mean, you know, had been there for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel like there was any kind of fear in the general population about an attack such as 9/11?
No, it was absolutely out of the blue. No one had ever imagined such a thing.
Could you describe the moment that you heard about what happened?
Sure. I was teaching at a university in Florida called the Barry University. It's down in the Miami-Dade County Metroplex. And I was getting ready for my first class of the day. I was sitting in my office preparing, and I had news radio on. And on the radio, it said that a plane had just hit the World Trade Center. Well, I rushed out of my office and into our conference room where we had a television with a cable hookup, and I turned it on and flipped over to CNN, and I was just in time to see the plane hit the second tower.
Mm-hmm. What were your initial thoughts when you first heard about the attacks?
Well, when I first heard that first announcement, I thought that it had been a horrible accident. There is a little bit of precedent for that. Just after the Second World War, a plane flew into the Empire State Building. But the Empire State Building was constructed very differently, and the plane was a propeller plane, much smaller than the jumbo jet that hit the two towers. And so obviously the Empire State Building is still there. Most people who aren't history buffs don't even know that a plane ever hit it, but it did happen. And so I thought that must be what has happened now. There must have been another horrible accident. Then when I saw the plane fly into the second tower, I knew it was no accident.
How did you continue to follow the news as the events progressed through the day?
Well, at first, as I said, I was in the conference room, and of course, almost immediately I was joined by all my colleagues in the department. But at the time, nothing had been said or done about canceling classes. And so I had to teach a class that morning. In fact, the class that I had to teach was broadcast news. So I went into the class and I said, and I could see looking at my students' faces that they had all already heard. But I said, okay, this morning we get to look at news live. And so we turned on the CNN broadcast in the classroom and watched. Mm-hmm. And I said, those of you who want to be in news, this is it. When the world falls apart, you go to work. And so we watched the coverage. And very quickly, my students picked up on Dr. Martin. Seems like they're just saying the same few things over and over. And I said, yes, that's true. And I said, you got to remember, this is a live broadcast. And all across the country, people are getting phone calls from their friends and family saying, oh, dear Lord, you're not going to believe this. Turn on the news. And so we've been following it now for about 45 minutes at that point in the class. But all over the country, people are seeing this for the very first time. And the reason they're repeating a very few facts is because they have very few facts. This is what they have.
You've talked about this a little bit, but in 2001, what exactly did your career and life look like, and how did that affect your experience and your initial reaction?
Good question. Well, I was a college professor already in 2001. And this is the kind of horrible accident or horrible example that nobody who teaches in our field ever wants to have to deal with students, but we do. As far as how it affected my future, I can't really draw a straight line between the events of 9/11 and my career since. Obviously, I'm no longer in South Florida. I'm here, but that really didn't have anything to do with 9/11. It was a horrible day, but it didn't impact me as directly as it did many other people.
How did what happened affect your life in the days following?
Well, I will never forget, classes were very shortly after mine canceled by the president of the university. And so I had a couple days to deal with it. One of the things that I did was, I'm a blood donor, and I went down to my local Red Cross to give blood, thinking that might help. And literally there was a line stretching around the building. Of course, we didn't realize, or maybe we didn't want to realize, that by and large, either people made it out of the building uninjured or they didn't make it out. And so, ironically, the Red Cross, for the first time in a very long time, had far more blood than it could actually use. And so but that's kind of a side note. My daughter was, not quite one when that happened. And so spent a lot of time over the next couple days hugging her. I remember that.
What community response did you notice around you?
Well, as I said, the immediate response of all of us who could give blood was to do so. In South Florida, there are a lot of New York connections, and lots of South Florida charities were rushing people up to New York as quickly as they could to try and deal with the aftermath. A lot has been said in the decades since about the national unity of the time, but for a few brief days, we were united as a country. And then, of course, as it became revealed that it was not a traditional attack, not like Pearl Harbor, that it was a terrorist group, and which terrorist group was it, and what were their issues, and blah, blah, blah. And it didn't take very long at all for things to get back to the partisan divide that we seem to have been in since, at least the at least the 1960s.
In your experience, how did what happened on 9/11 change the country?
Frankly, I'm not certain that it did. As I said, for those of us who lived through it, within about 6 weeks, you had, and maybe it didn't even take that long, but it took me that long to become aware of it. But you had people on the left saying, well, this is really a consequence of Republican policies, and people on the right saying, well, no, it's really a result of the fact that we haven't taken a stronger stand in the Middle East. And of course, you have your conspiracy theorists who persist to this day saying, oh, it was all an inside job to set up something or other. I don't know what. But so I'm really not certain that it did.
How do you think the country could have responded differently?
I can only go by history here. I'm a big history buff. And I know that prior to Pearl Harbor, lots of Republicans and independents had huge problems with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, with his administration, with what he had done to try and bring the country out of the Depression, some of his other policies. I won't go so far as to say that FDR was as controversial on the right as, say, Bill Clinton was, but there was not a lot of love lost there. But the day after Pearl Harbor, Republicans united and stood behind the president 1,000,000%. And they, not only that, but they maintained that through the entire war years, through 4 long years of war. And I'm not sure if it was the fact that it was a Republican president in office, or it was the fact that there wasn't an identifiable country that we could declare war against. But as I keep saying, within 6 weeks, it was back to, oh, well, if we hadn't done this in the Middle East, they wouldn't have done that to us. And it's really Bush's fault or Reagan's fault or Nixon's fault or somebody's fault. I almost have thought since that I don't know if President Gore would have been a better leader during the time, but I do know, and this is going to be probably the most controversial thing that I say, I do know based on history that Republicans rally around Democrats during wartime much more solidly than Democrats rally around Republican presidents.
How does 9/11 impact the way you live now?
I think for those of us who lived through it, "9/11 still stands as a reminder that, one, take nothing for granted, if we let it remind us of that. And two, it stands as a reminder that we live in a world that's not the World War II era where one country would formally declare war on another and they would have it out with the tragic loss of blood and treasure, but at least it was two identifiable entities that were having it out on the world stage. The incredible amount of damage that just a handful of apparently unaffiliated fanatics wrought on this country. I believe the term is asymmetrical warfare. That's something that we still are in, whether we choose to recognize it or not.
Over the years, have you seen a change in how 9/11 is remembered?
Well, not really anything that I wouldn't have expected. Again, if you didn't live through it, you can't imagine the rush of just visceral outrage. How could anyone do this? No matter what your cause is, how could anyone do this? And I think as it's remembered now, I think there's still mourning for those lost and the families whose lives were forever changed. And of course, you've got the Memorial Park in New York City, but that sense of outrage is gone.
As years have passed, there's an ever-increasing number of people who are too young to remember 9/11. So how do you think that we as a country should make sure we don't forget it in light of that?
Well, the fact that there is a permanent memorial in New York City is helpful, I think. I think we need to do a better job of teaching the history, but then again, I just think we as Americans need to do a better job of teaching history, period, across the board. There's only so much you can do with an event like that. As I've said, I'm a big history buff, and in particular, I'm really interested in the World War II period. And I've, heard the radio recordings of Franklin Roosevelt addressing the nation after the Pearl Harbor attack, and I've seen the documentaries and the films that were taken and so forth. But that was long before I was born, and I'll never experience the same visceral outrage that that generation did. I had family members who were old enough to remember that, and I remember one time I was talking with one of them about they were going to buy a new car, right? And they were looking at two different models, one American and one Japanese. And I said, the Japanese car is getting so much better reviews all the way across the board, and it has been for years. And he said, sorry, son, I just can't do it. I just can't buy a Japanese car, because he remembered that day still. Is that what we want with 9/11, I don't know, but I know it's not something that we're going to get. I mean, no offense, you won't know, and I pray to God that you never have an experience like that in your life where you have to learn, okay, what that kind of a day does to people who love their country. I think there's only so much you can do, I guess.
This is my last question. How do you continue to remember 9/11 today in your personal life?
Well, I mean, the same way I remember, Pearl Harbor and the rest of American history. It's there. It's part of what we have to deal with. I don't make an annual ritual of it, but of course you don't really have to. The news media reminds us every year that it's rolling around. But again, the thing I try to convey, especially when I'm talking about news with my students who are interested in news, is this is what you train for. That's one thing that I want to make in this point for this interview, for this news class. This is what you guys are training for. This is going to sound horrible, but I'm going to say it anyway. There are reporters, both print and broadcast, in New York City who were on vacation the day of 9/11 and have been kicking themselves ever since because they missed the biggest story of a lifetime. The reason that most news is bad news is because, praise God, He has ameliorated the curse, and it's the exception, okay? Millions of flight miles are logged every year in this country, and people don't fly their planes into the building. The reason that it stands out in our memory like this is because this was literally unique. Nothing like it had ever happened before, and praise God, nothing like it has happened since. But it's terrible, okay? And that's something that journalists need to prepare themselves for. That you're going to spend a lot of your life covering the worst of life. Frankly, I don't understand how people who aren't believers do it. And in fact, as a matter of fact, I know from observation that people who aren't believers who are doing it, they don't do a real good job of coping with it. But nonetheless, it's the job.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope something of that was useful.
No, that was great.